I am back, Ralph Tyko, here to honor Willie Mays. My guest tonight is fellow podcaster, member of the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, Marc Weiss. Marc is an avid Willie Mays fan, and so am I. So we're going to retire his number 24 on the show, on the website. So if you go to the website, you'll see number 24, Willie Mays, will be retired. And he'll join Jackie Robinson, whose number was retired, number 42, and Babe Ruth. And we intend to retire other numbers down the line. Next in line is number 32. Three number 32s come to mind. One is Elston Howard, the great Elston Howard, the great Sandy Koufax, and the great Jimmy Brown. We go out of baseball for the first time in retired Numberedville and go to the Syracuse great number 32. And all those three players won Most Valuable Player awards in the same year, in 1963. So we'll be honored to retire his. As a matter of fact, at Syracuse,
didn't he wear 44?
Wear number 44, right? And but he wore number 32 with the Cleveland Browns, and he was Mr. Football in those years. But we got Willie to talk about first, and Marc, I'd like you to start the ball rolling, your earliest memories of Willie and how you came to worship him as you do.
Well, my earliest memories of Willie have to be watching the game on TV with my grandfather, and my grandfather always, acknowledging Willie's greatness, but Willie wasn't Joe DiMaggio to my grandfather. And we had this running argument probably for the rest of our lives about who was better and between the two of them. And I always said Willie was the best. And as I've gotten older and I've refined my views and how I think of things and what I've seen, Willie is and was and might be the only six-tool player to ever wear a major league uniform. And in my mind, retiring his number 24 is the biggest no-brainer on the planet, because the man's greatness, we talk about tools. We talk about the first tool is, can he hit? Can he hit for average? Can he hit for power? Willie could do that. Did he have speed? Willie had speed to burn. Willie not only led the league in homers, he also led the league in stolen bases a number of times. I think he was the first 30-30 guy. Can the guy field? Oh, sure, Willie could field. Could he throw? He had a rifle for an arm. And everyone says, well, what's the sixth tool? What is that one? And the sixth tool is, guess it.
Instincts. Baseball instincts.
Well, then he'd be the only seven-tool player, because the sixth tool was what goes on between the years. Willie was a baseball savant. Not only did it combine his instincts, like you just said, but he could think what other people were doing. And there came a point in his career where Willie himself would call the pitches from center field, flash the signs into the catcher, who then gave them to the pitcher. And when asked to Willie, why did you do that? He goes, because I know how to position all the fielders. So I want to make sure that the pitcher is pitching to the right spot and throwing the right pitch so we're in the right place to make the plays.
He was a bench coach before there were bench coaches. He was a bench coach on the field. He was like an assistant manager out there. I know Alvin Dark thought of him that way.
And Herman Franks, I believe, who was his manager after Alvin Dark, when they said, how come you let Willie do all these things? He used to say, who better to coach Willie Mays than Willie Mays? And maybe he stole that from the Red Auerbach line when Red Auerbach made Bill Russell the coach of the Celtics, and he said, who better to coach Bill Russell than Bill Russell? I think it takes really smart people to know when you've got somebody who's that smart and that intuitive and that talented to not overcoach them. And Willie was guilty of all of the above. He was smart. He was intuitive. He was physical. Has anyone ever played on the level that he played for as many years that he did this? I mean, we all remember as the old Willie, Mickey, and the Duke debates that went on in the streets of New York City during the mid-'50s. And
absolutely,
that debate ended after a while because.
Guy.
So you were a Willie guy, without a doubt, right?
Without a doubt.
But you were a Giant guy, so it was easy for you to be a Willie guy.
I worshipped Mantle. I recognized that he wasn't going to be Willie not because of his lack of talent. He just had injuries that he didn't rehabilitate properly. They didn't have the rehabilitation methods that they have today. And he played balls to the wall. He was also very unfortunate in his major injury that it came so early. Very ironic, DiMaggio playing center in the 51 World Series. Mantle and right, there's a drain pipe between them.
And I believe Willie hit the ball.
Willie hits the ball. That's exactly right. And he pulls up short, does DiMaggio, or does Mantle in pulling up short. He sticks his foot in the drain pipe and wrecks his knee. And although he was incredibly great, he the injuries precluded him from being as good as Mays. But I
also think that Mickey just didn't take care of himself. Like Willie took care of himself. Willie respected his body. Mickey really didn't. And I know Mickey had his demons, and we never want to lessen those things because demons are demons and addictions are addictions, and people don't choose them. Disease is disease. But Willie was just so much better at taking care of himself. And
you have to give him credit for that if you're going to analyze the two over the long period of time.
I have to think that has a lot to do with it because of the fact that he did take care of himself. And Willie played high-level ball even before you ever look at the major league numbers because as a teenager, he was playing Negro League ball. Before that, he was playing on his dad's team, a high-level semi-pro ball.
Really good semi-pro in the South. Those guys played what they call town ball.
Mm-hmm. And, like factory ball.
Yeah, exactly. Or in basketball, it's AAU. Or what was it? Olin Bachorn came out of Industrial League ball.
Industrial League, correct.
The Olympics out of Industrial League, and it was guys that just made their living working in whatever factory or businesses were set up, and it was like a day job, but they played a tough brand of basketball in churches and in gyms and rec centers and what have you. And, guys who may have been just a step below pro level at that time had an opportunity. And let's face it, when Willie was growing up, there was no guarantee that there would ever be an entrance into organized baseball. So these guys were playing pretty much for the love of it, and it was the only way they could express their talent.
Do you know that for Willie, baseball was his second sport? When
really?
asked, you must have been a great baseball player early on. You loved to play and this and that. And he acknowledged that. But he said, my real sport was he was a great quarterback in football. Because think about it. Willie's got the brain, right?
I would guess basketball because I know he played, the Giants and a lot of teams would, in the off season, would have 7 or 8 guys who played basketball. And they toured around playing teachers in different high schools in Northern California and what have you, teachers of varsity and what have you. Willie was a terrific basketball player. I didn't know that he was a quarterback.
And they said, and when asked, well, why baseball? If we fast forward and drop Willie into today, we would never have the greatest center fielder or greatest player to ever play the game, because he probably would have gone on to be one of the greatest quarterbacks in the NFL. And why didn't it go any further? He said, well, there was no college scholarships. He was in the South. None of those SEC schools were going to give a college scholarship to an African-American player. He knew that. And he said, my dad didn't have the money to pay for me to go to college, so the other alternative was he could have gone to one of the traditional black schools like Grambling or something like that, but his dad would have had to pay for it. And he said, I could earn money playing with men playing baseball. Baseball was the sport to make money. So it's not like he didn't love baseball and he wasn't great at it. Obviously, both were there. But he said football was really his initial ticket.
It's very interesting. Willie's from Alabama, and the black quarterback that played in the NFL in the 80s. Williams was his last name.
Doug Williams.
Right. He talked, his speech pattern was exactly like Willie's. So that's what I hit upon when I thought about that he could have been, I'm sure he could have been, immense hands, big hands, and that's
big hands. Easy to palm a football, easy to control it and throw it. Obviously we know he had the speed. And if we judge by his intellect on the baseball diamond, there's no way that he couldn't have been the kind of quarterback who came to the line of scrimmage like a Peyton Manning and just called his own plays and his own audibles. And he had the extra sense to be able to do it. We might have had the greatest quarterback in the history of football right before our very eyes, but we never got to see him play football. Football's lost, baseball's total game.
You know what goes lost about Willie? His terrific wit and sense of humor. I'll tell you a Willie Mays story. In 1954, Don Mueller, the right fielder of number 22, Don Mueller, was in a heated battle for the batting title with none other than the center fielder of the Giants, Willie Mays. Mueller wasn't known for his speed, and basically Willie was taking Monty Irvin's, because he was kind of the end of the road by 1954.
Mm-hmm.
He was making up for both of their lack of speed by covering the entire outfield of the Polo Grounds.
And that was not a small outfield to cover.
No, it wasn't. It was as big as there's ever been in baseball. Truly, 450-something to center, incredible outfield, okay? So it comes down to the last day, and Willie wins the batting title, and they're interviewing Don Mueller, and they say, Don, you finished runner-up, blah, blah, blah. And Don Mueller, nice, humble guy, he says, well, it's no disgrace to finishing second place to the best center fielder in baseball. And Willie comes by and he looks over and he goes into the mic. He goes, the best right fielder too. In other words, and he meant it, and he was. But so, what was the first time you saw Willie Mays play?
I think probably the first time I saw him play, and I was very young, was during like the 69 or the 70 season. And of course, being at my age, I got to see Willie at the I won't say the twilight, because he had an extended prime, but it was probably toward the end of his prime, maybe even inching toward the twilight of his career. And I just was amazed at how this guy just, controlled the game and ran around the field doing the things that he did, and the respect that other players had for him. And I never heard anyone say anything bad about the guy either. And as we move forward to today, we know people just always have something to say about someone. They could figure out something to pick on, and nobody did about Willie. And my grandfather would, like I said, begrudgingly, say Willie was excellent. He was very good, and that he wasn't DiMaggio. And I think that made me more interested in watching Willie. I get to see him on the Game of the Weeks. Now, you probably got to see him a little bit more out on the coast than I did over here in New York. But through the years after that, I've been able to see Willie on game films, old old games that are on video, the highlights, and all the interviews. I would say though,
the anecdotal stories about Willie.
Yes, the stories are amazing.
Amazing. He's just worshipped. Ken Boyer line. He hits a ball to deep left center field. Deep left. He goes, hello, double. And he looks up, goodbye, double. Because there's Willie. And one of them, somebody said, I don't remember who it was, the only man who could have caught that ball, Willie hits a ball, and the only man who could have caught that ball hit that ball. It was Willie Mays.
Correct.
That was a great story about Willie, too. But hello, double.
Goodbye, double. I just think of some of like the amazing things that happen in Willie's career, and because of the fact that he's such a guarded and private person, we don't hear the same stories that we do, and a lot of it can be coastal too. Like, I guess being here in New York, we get lousy, so to speak, with all of the great Yankee stories, but we don't hear the Willie stories, and Willie was only in 4 World Series. So I think that kind of limits the stories and the exposure too. But when he came up, he was in such a deep funk when it came to hitting that, I mean, he could have been that flash in the pan guy that was great in the minors, because I think at one point he was seeing like 470 something in Minneapolis and they had to bring him up, and he couldn't hit at all on the major league level for the first 2, 3, 4 weeks. And he was upset. I mean, he actually even cried. He said Leo DeRocha, send me back. I can't play here. And Leo said to him, just catch the ball. If you can field center field, I don't care what you hit. The rest of the guys will do the work. And from that point on, he became the player that he was supposed to be. As a matter of fact, the team obviously won the pennant, which, we all talk about the Bobby Thompson home run. We know about it. But Willie was on deck, and Willie was one of the driving forces, because the defense on that team was phenomenal when he did that. And we always have to give a lot of credit to Monty Irvin. If you look at the 2 big figures in his career in that first year in 1951, Leo was definitely the father figure. There's no question about it. He learned a lot of his edginess and grit about the game from Leo, but Monty was the big brother. Monty was the one who would say, yeah, Leo said to do that, but let's take that back a notch, or let's not do this, or whatever the case may be. And he was the guiding light. He was the one who really helped Willie acclimate. And then, he wins the Rookie of the Year, which is no small feat. And when he went 1 for 26, do you know the only hit he got during that span, who that came off of?
Well, no, I don't.
Warren Spahn. He had a home run off of Spahn.
Oh, was that the first? Oh, the first home run. Yes.
Yeah.
Was that his first hit?
I think it was the first hit, but I know it's definitely his first home run. It happened during that period, and he always thanked Warren Spahn for it, because he said that kept him in the league. And Warren Spahn said, "Yeah, oh boy, I bet the rest of the league doesn't thank me for that one."
Right. Well,
but remember what happened in the 51 series? Besides the ball that he hit, that obviously was the genesis of the Mays. Think of the outfield he played in. He had Monty Irvin and Hank Thompson alongside of him.
It was the first time 3 blacks played in the same outfield, let alone in the World Series. Don Mueller had gotten hurt. They moved Hank Thompson from third base.
Because Don got hurt in the 3-game playoff. He got hurt in that inning, in the final inning when Bobby Thompson hit the home run.
Right.
I believe he slid into third base and broke his leg, or had a fracture or something, may be the case. And that's why they had the 3 guys in the outfield.
I don't think he fractured it, but he missed the World Series. Monty Irvin fractured his ankle another time, too, and really ruined his career. There's a terrific picture of Willie literally crying over Monty, who's writhing in pain at third base when he broke his ankle. But they, like I say, first time 3 blacks played in the same outfield, and there were, it wasn't easy for a black person, even though Jackie had a a few short years before, broken the color barrier, there was a lot of snickering going on, a lot of in the press. The N-word was used, a little
latent racism.
It was more than blatant, and that racism carried over to when they moved to San Francisco, and Willie he couldn't buy a house in St. Francis Woods, in that little section of San Francisco. He couldn't, beautiful section too, right by.
Well, you know what would happen? He'd go to buy the house, he'd try to put a binder down on it, and they'd call back and say the house is off the market.
Right. Oh, yeah. That's how San Francisco
It actually took the mayor of San Francisco to step in.
San Francisco with the way Boston was and how they treated Bill Russell and the horrible things they did to Bill Russell. There's a lot of conservative.
Could you imagine? Could you imagine if you were if I was the next door neighbor and they wouldn't let Willie Mays live next door to me? I'd be like, "Are you guys nuts?"
Of course, that's because you and I are you and I. But the people that happen to live next door, you know how Yankee Stadium was. You know how the Yankees took the black players. You know how their philosophy of if we bring up a black player, we're going to have a lot of black patrons that aren't going to fit in, aren't going to be liked by the traditional Yankee fan. All that bullshit. Well, it was worse out here. That was New York City. You can imagine how it was in San Francisco.
Well, I think Willie had a tough time with this. And the reason is because Willie, to his credit, has never, ever been the type of person that would ever blame racism or outside factors into the way things have happened for him in his life or his career. But that goes back to when he was a youngster, because he always played in the neighborhood with kids in integrated games. So he never thought twice about playing alongside a white ball player. He was never uncomfortable. It never bothered him. So this just cut him to the core because he never expected that.
Right. And they also, the fans in San Francisco, took to him really late because when they moved out here, Cepeda was coming up, and Cepeda got the bulk of the press and all this. And Willie wasn't showing off his talents like he did in the Polo Grounds because he was playing in a very, very small Seal Stadium originally before they moved to the Candlestick, and before that monstrosity was built.
Oh, yeah.
And so he didn't get a chance to really show off his talents for the homegrown fan, and it took them a long time to take to Willie.
I think the other factor too is fan bases always want that homegrown guy who's one of their own, that they saw raised up from the time they were a pup to the time that they become that franchise player. And Willie was already established. He was one of those fancy pants guys from the East Coast, and they didn't take to him right away. Plus, he had matured. You know, Monty was gone, and so he didn't have his big brother around anymore. He also went through a tough time when Leo was fired, and I think it was Bill Rigney took over, and Bill just didn't treat him with the same respect and allow him to do the same things that Leo did, and that irked him and it brushed him the wrong way. So I think by the time he gets to San, and plus the Giants were not a first division team either. And so I think things were a lot different for him once he got there, and absolutely, when a man can't buy a house that's on the market and they pull it out right from under his feet after he's gone through a lot of other things, a 3,000-mile move, that really hits right between the eyeballs.
He was also breaking up with his first wife at that time as well, and that's true. Took that very hard.
And a lot of people think that he not only was it a personal problem for him too, but a financial problem as well, that he lost a lot of money. And
you mentioned Herman Franks. Herman Franks is the guy who ended up saving him financially. Herman Franks was a millionaire. He made his money in oil, if I'm not mistaken. And he managed Willie. He took Willie from the depths the depth of financial ruin, almost went bankrupt, and brought him back to solvency, and that was pretty cool for Willie. Tell
I
me
think
about
Frank's had a true admiration for him.
Pardon me?
Frank's had a true admiration for him.
For Willie.
And Willie needed that too, because he, like I said, he had that great first relationship with Leo. Probably 5 or 6 years played for Leo, and then had the problems with Bill Rigney. And even though Alvin Dark was a teammate, they weren't tight.
Well,
I think Alvin was a Southerner.
Yeah. Alvin Dark had Southern stuff, and he said stupid things. He made a case out of Orlando Cepeda's RBIs. He had like 126 RBIs, and Dark says something like, "Well, those I measured those RBIs. They didn't come at clutch times. It wasn't this." He was so full of crap about race and this, that, and the other thing that he said things about that where he totally lost the team. And Willie says, "Listen, we got to keep the team together. His days here are numbered." He called guys like McCovey and the Alous, and he had all these guys in the room, and he said, "Look, I hate what he said. He had made some really incredibly stupid remarks." He says, "I hate what he said more than you guys hate it because I was his teammate. And all these things are nuts, but we got to stay on the same page and win." And eventually they did, and eventually he was gone, was Dark. And, so after Leo, who he called Mr. Leo, and who doted over him like the child that Leo never had. It was his one great baseball contribution. I mean, not to say that he didn't have a terrific baseball career on his own, all things, but, hey, developing a fragile, egoed Willie who comes up 20 years old and is living where you and I, when we went to the pilgrimage to the Polar Grounds, he was playing stickball a block and a half away on St. Nicholas Drive with the kids. He was a kid himself living in a boarding house and treated like, like a king in New York. And then to go to San Francisco, very difficult on the man. Very difficult.
Very difficult. And I think of some things about Willie's career. Like everyone will always talk about the great Ted Williams losing 5 years to the military service and not affecting his total numbers. But what about Willie? Willie missed most of 52 and all of 53 during the Korean War. And because of that, he obviously, when he came back in 1954, wins the MVP and the team wins the World Series. So you know how important he was to the team and how great he had become. But he lost those 2 great years, and there's no way of getting those numbers back.
You can't compare him to Ted Williams. Ted Williams lost his early prime time
and his late prime.
And his late prime. He lost.
I don't say anyone would compare to Ted Williams what he gave up for the sacrifice to his country. There's no question about that. But I just want to say that, Willie lost time too. And his contemporaries, a lot of those guys didn't do that. And one good thing did come out, though, of him being in the service in 52, 53. That's where he learned to make the basket catch. And that's where he figured out the tight hat flying off the head.
That's very interesting. And it was a tight hat because a big hat wouldn't have fallen off. A tight hat.
He did it a size smaller. And he'd wear it up on his head.
People talk about that, yes. I think Rigney taught him the basket catch. Rigney did the basket catch before. He was a utility infielder with the Giants, 51. And went on to manage it in Minneapolis. I think Rigney was responsible more for the basket catch than the service, but
well, I think that's where he practiced it because he played all that ball on the service in those traveling teams. Because he wasn't active duty, but he was not in Korea. He was stateside. He never left stateside.
Right.
And so he played a lot of ball and he practiced that. And he said he knew that he wanted to have something that would be entertaining. And he said, but it was also serviceable too, because he said that when he caught the ball in the basket, his hands were in the perfect spot to pick up the ball and throw it.
Yeah,
in that one movement.
Almost a three-quarter throw. He'd sling the ball almost sometimes like a sinker ball pitcher.
Mm-hmm.
And the time from when he caught it to when he got it out of his hands, incredibly quick hands. And he knew where to throw instinctively. And he was Willie. I mean, there was he enjoyed himself in a way that carried over to both his fellow players and the fans.
I'll tell you on a personal note, I get reminded of Willie's basket catch every time I coach softball and my daughter's in center field, because that's actually how she catches the ball.
Really?
She catches it with the basket catch in center field. There's been other all-star coaches who try to change her and change the way she throws, because she throws just the way she does and the way he threw, and she has a gun of an arm. And I never change it because I enjoy watching it and I understand why she does it. And it just brings back those kind of memories to me. You know, if it worked for the great Willie Mays and you can catch that way, there's no reason to do it differently. And I think he said he only dropped the ball once in his whole career doing that.
That is very interesting. Mark, would you tell me, because by the time Willie came back to New York, I was out in California.
Oh, I remember that when he came back here.
And, tell me about, I know he hit a home run in his first at-bat against the Giants. Traded for the late Charlie Williams.
Yes. Well, do you know why the trade happened in the first place?
Because Stoneham was going under and he wanted to take care of Willie.
Yes, Stoneham was going under, and he wanted to take care of Willie, and he knew that they didn't have the wherewithal to be able to make sure that Willie was set up for the rest of his life. And lo and behold, Mrs. Payson, who was a member of the Giants board when they moved from New York to San Francisco, she actually had the lone dissenting vote.
She was the only person who they didn't vote unanimously to leave.
Correct. And she actually had M. Donald Grant cast the ballot for her as a representative. And maybe one day down the road we'll talk about M. Donald Grant and his history in New York baseball, but let's talk about positive things right now. And in this case, we're talking about...
I think when you think about his negativity, M. Donald Grant, you're going to think about how he was the guy that traded Tom Seaver. Am I correct?
Yeah, and I'll think about how he had Shea Stadium nicknamed Grant's Tomb during the latter part of the 70s because of what he was doing with the Mets franchise.
Right.
But
no question about that. But
Mrs. Payson wanted Willie. She loved Willie and she wanted him back. And he was so happy to come back. And I can't tell you the anticipation of the fans when everyone found out that Willie was coming back to New York. It's like the conquering hero returns. It was just amazing. I mean, even us young kids who never saw him play for the Giants when he was in New York and saw him at the latter part of his career with the Giants in San Francisco, we just knew. We knew who this guy was. And when he was coming back here, and the Mets were a contending team. They weren't exactly, a second division club. They were a contending team. They'd won the series 2-3 years earlier. They still had that nucleus of pitching.
The pitching was terrific, and in '73 they ended up winning the National League pennant.
They did, but you brought up that home run in his first game back. He hits what turns out to be the game-winning home run off of his old teammates versus the Mets. I remember going to that game because I badgered my grandfather to take me. It was in May. It was one of those awful, like, damp, kind of drizzly, cloudy May type of days that with the wind in Shea Stadium probably felt like it was 14 degrees out instead of like 60 degrees, which it was, or something like that.
Right.
But I had to go. It's like my grandparents only lived about 10 minutes. They lived in Queens, 10 minutes away from Shea Stadium. and I got to go see that game, and that home run was just like to use a cliche, it was amazing when he hit that ball and hit that home run. Matter of fact, if he called it a career at that point and just walked off the field and never came back, I think it would be something that people would talk about forever and ever. Because who would expect that he'd come back? I mean, he was batting like 1-something with the Giants. I mean, everyone said, Willie Mays, he's done. It's just a publicity move. They're sending him to the Mets because New York, loves the guy. They just want to say farewell to him. And he hits that home run. And he actually goes on. I think he hits 267 for the Mets in the 72 season, which had a lot of injuries for them. And he played a very competent ball out there for them. He was not a distraction. He was not a mascot. He was not some old guy they carried. He was a legitimate ball player and got revitalized by being there.
Nice. What will you remember most about him as we close the tribute?
You know what? It's an obscure stat, but it tells you a lot about this guy. He's the only player in the history of this great game to have hit a home run in every inning from inning 1 through 16.
Whoa.
Let's think about that for a while.
Oh, wow. That is a beautiful stat. I love that. Thank you.
It's amazing stat.
Let me just add a bibliography to what we're talking about. It's a book that I grew up reading, and I must have read 5 times over the course of my lifetime. It's called Willie's Time, and it was written by Charles Einstein. If you get a chance, read Willie's Time by Charles Einstein. Tremendous
I've got
book.
to pick it up.
Please do. Thank you, Marc. You're terrific. I'm going to close the tribute by just telling everybody out there what Willie would tell you. Keep on keeping on. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Marc. Catch you on the
My
flip
pleasure.
top.
Thank you, Ralph.
Adios.